Hope you had a great weekend. Good to have you with us here on the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast, coming to you from the North Country, where it's actually pretty doggone warm. They're going to reach 60 on Wednesday, and I'll take it in the 40s this day as we start the week out. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this podcast. Also sponsored by Ring of Fire Radio. Raw Story, you can get my podcast on iTunes. Follow me on Twitter at Ed Show. Interesting survey by the New York Times about the mood of people in this country reflected on Twitter. We'll get to that a little bit later on. A lot of Americans are troubled by the fact that there's tremendous consternation with this dealing with Iran that's taken place. It's something that the president wants and has worked for with other countries. It's just not us here, folks. But 47 Republican senators have signed on to a letter warning the Iranian leadership this day, Monday, that any nuclear deal needs congressional approval in order to last beyond President Obama's term. My interpretation, they're trying to sour the deal. They're trying to make Iran think that President Obama is not legitimate and anything he does isn't going to hold up, and we might as well have a confrontation. I mean, this is a drumbeat to war. That's how I interpret it. For more on this, let's get an expert, Admiral Joe Sestak, running for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania. Joe, good to have you back with us.
Good to be on with you, Ed. Thank you.
What's your interpretation? First of all, I guess I can't remember the last time an elected body did this type of technique or tactic to a president. Can you compare it to anything you've ever known of?
No, I can't. And what I feel is actually some embarrassment and disappointment. They have to remember that the world looks at the President of the United States in such a unique fashion. And to denigrate the number one institution who represents us around the world is absolutely inexcusable. I don't care about politics. What I care about is America. And this letter has stepped beyond the bounds to actually say to someone over there, someone we're trying to deal with, which could be harmful, disregard our commander-in-chief. Inexcusable.
So what does this do? Do you think this will have any effect whatsoever on the Iranians?
I don't think it will have any whatsoever. Look, I have dealt with the Iranian Navy as well as the Revolutionary Guard at sea. And there's not a question in my mind, particularly when I was dealing with the Iranian Navy, that it's regular Navy, it's extremely professional. They will see this letter, those Iranians who are actually doing the negotiations. And frankly, I may disagree with a lot of them. There's not a question that they're smart guys. As what a stupid renegade group this is to do that. That said, it's still embarrassing to think that they will not have enough respect for their own American institution to do that. It's an embarrassment.
Well, I think it's also an issue of responsibility, and I think it's interesting that the Republican co-sponsor of that bill, Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee, did not sign the most recent letter, the open letter to Iran's leaders. And no Democrats have signed the letter either. Obviously, they want to give the president an opportunity to navigate in the foreign policy arena. But what does that signal that Corker, who's the chairman of Foreign Relations, did not sign this letter?
He feels the same way I do. There's not a question that as senator, he really has had enough experience in foreign affairs and other areas to understand the heft by which a president of the United States is represented in America, in the world, by how Americans represent that institution abroad. And so I think he stepped away from this because he knows it hurts America.
One of the tough things that President Obama is dealing with is, of course, being able to navigate on the international front when he has the majority party in Congress working against him. How does that play out in negotiations on foreign affairs as you see it?
Well, I think it has been, to put it mildly, less than helpful. Partisanship used to stop at the water's edge. You and I have talked about this before. And when something was brought back, there was a debate upon it. So that went for President Reagan when he dealt on nuclear arms issues with the Soviet Union. It went that way when a Democratic president would deal, as President Clinton did, on nuclear arms with our number one adversary at the time, the Soviet Union. The fact that we have this denigration of an effort, the addition of the applied sanctions by some people in Congress while negotiations are going on, truly shows that we don't have any longer the men and women being elected who are of the world, also of America, but also of the world, and understanding about how the world, the tough neighborhood, and don't play around with our president's prestige around the world if you want us to win in that tough neighborhood.
Yeah. And finally, Admiral Joe Sestak with us. He's a former congressman and running for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania. Finally, your thoughts on Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, speaking early last week to the Congress. Was that, of course, the Obama administration does not feel that this was very helpful at all. Your thoughts on it?
No, I don't think it was helpful whatsoever. I wish that Mr. Boehner had not extended the institution. I wish Mr. Netanyahu had not come here. I understand he represents his country, and he has the absolute right to accept an invitation. That said, at the bottom line of all this, Ed, is number one, interest of anything we do is in the interest of the security of the United States of America, of which Israel is part of that. And we have destroyed the uranium that was enriched at 23% that could have gotten in one more month up to a fissile material that could be used as an explosion as a nuclear device. We've destroyed that down to 4% already in these negotiations. It would take them a year to get back up to the level they had been. And we've destroyed the centrifuges that could do this. For us to have someone be invited by an American congressman bypassing the president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, and have someone try to portray to us what the real situation is, that it's our men and women who have to go into harm's way, and letting us make sure we protect them in our means of doing so. Negotiations first, military if we have to, is inexcusable in my mind for this to have come about.
Good to have you with us, Admiral. All the best to you. We'll do it again. Joe Sestak here on the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ed, very much.
CBS Face the Nation. This is President Obama talking about, hey, we're not losing anything by talking to the Iranians.
Iran has abided by the terms of the agreement. We know what's happening on the ground in Iran. They have not advanced their nuclear program. We've been able to roll back their 20% highly enriched uranium during this period of time. It's given us unprecedented access into what they are doing. So we're not losing anything through these talks.
And you've said that if there's no deal, you're willing to walk away. That's it.
Absolutely. If there's no deal, then we walk away.
So there's two forces in action here. Obviously, the Obama administration wants to do something with other countries to reel in the nuclear program of the Iranians. And then, of course, you have Benjamin Netanyahu, who clearly is sending a message to the hard right-wingers in Congress who want to oppose the president, giving them all the ammunition they possibly need to show up with a letter signed by 47 Republicans telling the Iranians basically, our president sucks, you don't have to do business with him, and the deal isn't going to hold anyway, and oh, by the way, we have the legislative power. This is Dianne Feinstein on Meet the Press on Sunday saying that the prime minister was arrogant.
And I think that, what Prime Minister Netanyahu did here was something that no ally of the United States would have done. I find it humiliating, embarrassing, and very arrogant.
Let's turn to Steve Clemens, Washington editor-at-large of The Atlantic. Steve, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Ed.
What's your interpretation of this move by the Senate Republicans?
Well, I think it's unprecedented. I think that it demonstrates that you have a lot of members in the Senate, a lot of new members in the Senate who are not deeply steeped in foreign policy and national security, whose disregard for President Obama is higher than their concern for the United States and its interests.
And one of those people you're talking about is the guy that authored the letter, and that's Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who's a big Tea Partier. I mean,
he's a brand new guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's just joined the Armed Services Committee. He's just getting his feet wet, and he's posturing in something that I don't think he is fully assessed, because there is not a higher stakes gambit for the United States than getting Iran off of a nuclear track right now and repositioning Iran in the world. It is a way for the United States to restore its mystique as a superpower, showing it can shape the U.S. system or the global system in ways other than through military power. And as President Obama said, if the deal is rotten, he's not going to go with it. But for 47 senators to be led by Tom Cotton to sign this paper, in a sense, sends a signal that we're not a serious country. This makes America small.
Yeah.
This makes America look like a very small, petty power that is no longer in touch with itself. And I think that it is a remarkable development that I don't think it's going to impede the deal that the president will make. And I think, as you and I have discussed, that if President Obama secures a historic deal with Iran, you'll see lots of other pieces move around the world. Remember, this is not just with the United States. This was with the Permanent Five of the United Nations in Germany. And when those other states begin moving, it will close the escape hatch that these Republican legislators think that they have.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell did sign it, and so did the four presidential hopefuls, and that would be Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Lindsey Graham. And they warned that the deal, which is likely to be at least 10 years in duration, could be at risk once Obama leaves the White House, which they're obviously trying to derail this deal at all costs. There's a history to this. Let's go back to July of 1996. This isn't the first time that Benjamin Netanyahu has told the Congress that Iran is not a good player. Listen to this.
The most dangerous of these regimes is Iran, that has wed a cruel despotism to a fanatic militancy. If this regime or its despotic neighbor Iraq were to acquire nuclear weapons, this could presage catastrophic consequences, not only for my country and not only for the Middle East, but for all of mankind. I believe the international community must reinvigorate its efforts to isolate these regimes and prevent them from acquiring...
It's always running out. And then, of course, last Tuesday, the Israeli Prime Minister added this to Congress.
The reason I've been warning for 25 years is because Iran has been trying to get to the bomb, and if we hadn't acted, I and President Obama and Congress and others, if we hadn't acted in these intervening years, Iran would have had the nuclear weapon a long time ago. And if we don't, if we let our guard down, if we had let our guard down, then Iran would have had the weapons. If we let our guard down now, it will have the weapon.
So those were the same things that American officials were saying back in '96. The president is consistent saying that right now, no matter where Netanyahu stands. Netanyahu's position on this has never changed. You can go back that many years and find out he had the same opinion about him that he has right now. So what would sour a deal with the Iranians at this point, Steve?
I think that the only thing that will really sour the deal is not Congress, is not whatever. It will simply be the supreme leader in Iran has so much mistrust for the United States, so much doubt, and so much fear about what normalization eventually with the West would look like, that they could go, that the supreme leader could take Iran in a different direction. He may use something like this letter as a reason justifying his mistrust in the United States and its system and how double-dealing he believes America is. And so this letter could be consequential in that, and that would be, I think, a great tragedy. But the other broader point, whenever I hear Netanyahu talking about his concern over this bomb, his concern over Iran over these many years, it's also important to remember the longtime head of the Mossad in Israel has come out and savagely attacked Netanyahu for his irresponsibility and for having created conditions that have actually made Israel much less secure and made it much more vulnerable, has helped taunt and prompt Iran in this direction. So it's important to remember that Israel itself is not monolithic, and that Netanyahu is a voice, a key important voice, but there's a lot of diversity inside Israel that do not agree with or support what Netanyahu has said.
So this takes the president into the political arena with the Republicans. This letter with 47 signatures
Absolutely.
on it. So what's the proper response to keep the deal tight? Say that they're insignificant to the Iranians, to discredit the Senate and really pick a political fight with them. What's his best play?
I think his best play is to talk to the merits of the argument. The merits of the argument are that if you can take Iran off a nuclear weapons track for a decade plus, you've achieved something that Bibi Netanyahu and everybody else with their bluster have not achieved, and you have created a much safer world. I think that's part one. Part two is I think that he can say that the alternative to this is Iran will no doubt return to an appetite for the nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon, and that will put us on an unavoidable track towards conflict with Iran. And as John Kerry has told me and others have told me in the past, they will trip us into war, meaning legislators in Congress that do not understand that there are two boxes here. There's one where we either get this right and we get a negotiated path. If we don't, it likely puts us back a number of years and Iran races forward. Remember, these are not technical issues. The ability to make a bomb exists in the mind, and Iran already has that capacity. And so you're not going to undo that. What you have to do is undo their intention of where they're going to go. And if we basically close that down, Iran will go back to what it was doing before. Yeah. And in that particular case, we will no doubt be in some form of Cold War containment or armed conflict with Iran. And, many people argue that that's what Netanyahu wants, that he wants to create a red line trigger for the United States to go to war with Iran on Israel's behalf, which I find outrageous and wrong.
Okay. Steve Clements, we'll see you tonight on The Ed Show. Always a pleasure to work with you. Thanks so much. Washington editor-at-large of The Atlantic. Communication Workers of America bring you this podcast with Progressive Allies. CWA is working with organizations to move forward and restore workers' bargaining rights and reclaim our democracy. They got a great website. Check it out, www.cwa-union.org. Now this.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast to tell us how we're doing. More details at wegoted.com.
Ring of Fire Radio brings you this broadcast. All of our podcasts are free. You can get them at wegoted.com, rawstory.com, ringoffireradio.com. And thanks for the download. All right, Hillary Clinton. This can't be about Hillary. This has to be about the Democrats. What's the big prize here? The big prize is not to make sure that Hillary's okay and in the clear with these emails. The big prize is that the Democrats need to win the White House again. And who can win the White House? That's the calculus in all of this. And how damaging is this going to be? I have questions. Why would Hillary use a different or secret server for her email system? That's a fair question. Whether you're for or against Hillary, whether you believe she'd be a good president or not. And this is basically where a lot in the Senate are starting to fall. Senator Dianne Feinstein had this to say.
Actually, what I would like is for her to come forward and say just what the situation is, because she is the preeminent political figure right now. She is the leading candidate, whether it be Republican or Democrat, for the next president, to be the next president. And I think that she needs to step up and come out and state exactly what the situation is. Some people say, well, she had a server.
You think this silence is hurting her?
I think at this point, from this point on, the server, the silence is going to hurt her.
There's no question about it. And this is so easy to clean up. And she's going to have to do more than Twitter, as I said on the tube on Friday. And look, the wolves are at the back door. One of them is Trey Gowdy, Republican from South Carolina, who is just making a beeline for every piece of negative information he can get about Hillary Clinton, and he's trying to make a name for himself. Here's his response.
Yes, sir. There are gaps of months and months and months, and if you think to that iconic picture of her on a C-17 flying to Libya, she has sunglasses on and she has her handheld device in her hand. We have no emails from that day. In fact, we have no emails from that trip. So it strains credibility to believe that if you're on your way to Libya to discuss Libyan policy, that there's not a single document that's been turned over to Congress. So there are huge gaps.
So that soundbite right there tells you how they're really scraping. Okay, everybody knows when you're on an iPhone, that doesn't mean you're emailing, okay? Could be texting, could be reading emails, doesn't mean that you're sending them. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. But to draw a conclusion from that picture, and this guy claims he's an attorney, give me a break. Let's go to James Peterson, Director of Africana Studies, Lehigh University. Dr. Peterson, good to have you with us.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for having me.
You bet. How big a problem is this as it evolves? And if you've got Dianne Feinstein, longtime senator from California,
Right.
who's in a position of authority, saying this is only going to snowball, I think.
It's absolutely right. I mean, Senator Feinstein is in a sort of tough spot there. Obviously, she's supporting Hillary Clinton, but also understands that the American public is going to demand to have access to these emails. I think, and I'm not trying to make excuses for Hillary Clinton here, Ed, at all.
No.
I just want to clarify that the sort of changeover for this position to have available all of their records is something that's fairly recent. And so Secretary Colin Powell did not have to have his email as a public record, right? And so, and again, this is no excuse for former Secretary Hillary Clinton, just to let you know that she's kind of was in that transition period, right, where we transitioned to making these emails on the government servers, making them available for archival records. And that's not to excuse her. It's just to say that people need to understand this is not something that has, email hasn't even been around that long, Ed. And so making these things public record or available to be archived for the federal government's purposes is a relatively new phenomenon. Now, that being said, former Secretary Clinton should really step into the void right now, release as much as she can of these emails, and be very transparent about discussing them. I can't imagine that there's anything here that the Benghazi truthers haven't already tried to turn against her. And so I would imagine that there could be very small amounts of political damage done to her person just by being up front right now and getting out of the way. The longer she's silent, Ed, as you know, the longer people like yourself and myself and other people in the media who may be, politically progressive or may want to see Hillary Clinton step into the presidency are still going to be fairly critical of just her lack of transparency around this particular issue.
Well, no other and there's talk about Joe Biden. There's talk about Bernie Sanders. There's talk about O'Malley, and then also the former senator from Virginia, Jim Webb. I mean, there are people out there who have been on the record saying that they're considering running.
Sure.
None of them have stepped out and said anything about this, which tells me that they want to be crystal clear and absolutely sure if they get into the arena. But I'm surprised that we haven't heard a potential candidate speak the same way Dianne Feinstein did. Your thoughts?
I think that Senator Feinstein, because of her position in the Senate, is under some pressure to step out on this and get out in front of this. She's also not potentially running for president. And remember, for half of the people you just named, they're also potential vice presidential candidates. And so it's unfortunate that things are this way, Ed, that the political calculus dominates transparency and truth in American politics, but that's the way that it is. I mean, again, except for VP Biden, almost everyone you named in that list of potential Democratic presidential candidates are also potential Democratic VP candidates and also potential VP candidates on a Clinton ticket. And so this is a very complicated moment. And what we need is leadership. We need for Hillary Clinton to get out in front of this. She's got a great team of people around her. They know where they can take damage on this and where they can't. And again, I can't imagine that the entire Benghazi scandal hasn't exposed what's worse or what's potentially bad about this material in the first place.
This is President Obama talking about just that, transparency.
And I'm glad that Hillary is instructed that those emails that had to do with official business need to be disclosed.
Well, you say that you have the most transparent administration ever. You said it again just a couple of weeks ago.
It's true.
How does this square with that?
Well, I think that the fact that she's going to be putting them forward will allow us to make sure that people have the information they need.
Well, a couple things here, and we got to be fair about this. President Obama didn't know she had the server, didn't know that she was operating and communicating in this regard. They found out through the media. That's not good, as I see it. Your thoughts?
Same here. I mean, again, this is not to excuse this behavior, but I hope people understand that because of the Clinton Global Initiative, because she's a former First Lady, because she's a former senator of the state of New York, Hillary Clinton has a lot of relationships around the world, some professional and public, probably some a little bit more private and personal, and she probably did not parse those on the way to becoming Secretary Hillary Clinton. And so there probably are some sensitive emails in there, maybe even with people as high up as head of state around the world. Again, she's built relationships over a long and complicated political career. And so now I'm sure her team is working very hard right now to figure out what they can release and what they cannot not release. And it puts President Obama in a bad spot. It's hard for some of us to believe that someone in his administration didn't understand that she wasn't being as transparent as possible with the email server and with her use of her private email. But that's what the president says. That's what we have to go on. The onus is on Hillary Clinton at this point in time to be as transparent as possible, to get out in front of it, and to diffuse the sort of political polemics that always attach to these kind of scandals. This does not have to be an overtly politicized issue. The American people want transparency. Provide them with that.
Dr. James Peterson, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, the iSafe team, and Ring of Fire Radio bring you this podcast. We're here every day, and you can go to my website at wegoted.com and archive all of our broadcasts. They are free. Rawstory.com, they do fabulous work. You can get my podcast on their website and also on iTunes. Tonight on The Ed Show on MSNBC, more on Iran and the attempt of the Republicans to spoil the deal. We're back tomorrow.